When you think about fantasy on the Sega Genesis, chances are you picture Golden Axe, Shining Force, or maybe even Sword of Vermillion. But there's one fantasy game that doesn't get enough attention, and that's Alisia Dragoon by Game Arts. This is a short fantasy action game about a woman and her fleet of dragons, and I'm here to tell you that it has a great conclusion. So turn back now if you don't want to know what happens next, because today we're going to spoil the story and ending for Alisia Dragoon on the Sega Genesis. This is Game Over, the early years. Meet Alisia Dragoon. She's a strong, independent, half-naked gladiator with multiple dragon sidekicks. That is, unless you're talking about the Alesia in the Japanese version, who is a wafy, red-headed sorceress who hates wearing pants. No matter which of these women you prefer, they're about to go on an adventure to save the world. As we learn from the instruction manual, Alesia is the daughter of a magician who attempted to defeat Baldur, the prince of all things evil, but failed. It was actually worse than that because he was tortured to death while his young daughter watched in horror. That girl has now grown into a beautiful, magic-wielding woman who's on a mission to stop Baldur from waking from his cocoon and unleashing evil and destruction on the world for a second time. Alesia and her dragon pals decide to leave the temple and travel through the forest in hopes of finding Orna, the evil bad guy's lackey who has brought the cocoon back to Earth. The good news is that she doesn't have to go very far because Orna is hanging out in a castle just outside of town. He tells Alesia that she's too late and that Baldur has returned, followed by a devastating magical strike that cripples our hero. He takes the cocoon with him, but invites Alesia to the evil palace, if she dares. She decides to go, obviously, but the path isn't going to be easy. We leave the castle and discover that it's next to a mountain filled with demonic bad guys. This leads to a swamp where Alesia not only has to fight off the guards, but also these human-eating lily pads. And things only get worse as day turns to night and she's stuck battling giant water snakes and whatever this is supposed to be. Actually, what is this? It doesn't matter because she jumps on a flying machine and we're off to the next level. Alesia is now fighting on a giant medieval zeppelin that is controlled by Baldur's goons. I'm not sure what they were thinking since the flying machine is headed directly towards his palace. Wouldn't it just make more sense to force Alesia to walk and fight her way to the palace? I mean, wouldn't that slow her down enough to wake up the sleeping bad guy, which is the whole point of this story? I don't want to tell them how to do their business, but the guy who ordered the free taxi ride should probably be fired immediately. Anyway, Alesia isn't complaining because the Zeppelin spits her out in a mountain range patrolled by a zombie dragon. This is probably a good time to mention that Alesia isn't only traveling with one dragon companion, but 4. That's going to be important later, but first she needs to fight her way through this cavernous maze. And also this other, completely separate cavernous maze. We're actually going to spend a lot of time underground, and it's kind of a drag. What Alesia eventually discovers is this wrecked ship that looks a whole lot more advanced than what she's used to. This is the hardest level in the game, but it's also one of the most interesting. We eventually find the right path and discover a floating platform that'll take us to the next stage. Now, if you're prone to epileptic seizures, then you may want to look away for a minute, because the platform shoots us up into the sky and we see lightning strike all around Baldur's palace. And this is it, folks. It's time for the final fight. So I have to say, the palace isn't nearly as nice as I was expecting. It's drab and everything looks exactly the same. I wouldn't want to live here. But we're not here to rate the interior design, but rather kick butt, starting with this wizard. It's a shame that we didn't catch his name because he's easily the hardest boss in the game, and not only because he can clone himself. Alesia eventually wins, but it looks like she's too late. Orna congratulates her for making it this far, but Baldur is cooking on the stove and is about to wake up. With no way to stop the inevitable, Orna predicts that she'll become Baldur's first sacrifice when he wakes up. This leads to the beatdown we've been waiting 8 long levels to lay on this creep. Alesia comes out on top, but the fight isn't over yet. The cocoon opens up and reveals Baldor's true shape, which is a flying demon that shoots snakes. Alesia unloads her thunder magic and eventually wins the day. And this is what happens next. You know, I love this kind of ending. It's not flashy and doesn't have any dialogue, but I love that we get to see the journey back home. So often we'll see the game end with our hero just hanging around the villain's lair. So I gotta say, it's actually nice to see the long trip home. And this is a cool way of doing it, while also rolling the credits, the worst part of most endings. I like that the four companions come together to help Alesia, and it's cool to finally see her riding the dragon at the very end. Plus, her friends and family were waiting patiently outside the temple. This is a happy and satisfying ending, all without saying a single word. Alesia kicked ass, and I think it's safe to say that her father would be proud. Hey, thanks for watching this episode of Game Over, The Early Years. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new episodes every Monday. Now here's the question I have for you. What's your favorite fantasy game? It doesn't have to be one of these Genesis games, but I'm hoping for some interesting picks in the comments below. In other news, Review Mageddon rolls along as we taking a look at Devil's Hunt tomorrow, followed by Daymare 1998 and Demoniaca. At least I think that's how you pronounce that. I'll know for sure by the time my review goes up later this week. In the meantime, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.